Hey, good afternoon, everyone. The final session, I think, for most folks, and thanks for those of you who are joining virtually. Today's panel here in San Diego at ASU+GSV is Reconceiving Business School. My name is Michael Goldberg. I'm a professor at Case Western Reserve University in Cleveland, Ohio. I also run our Entrepreneurship Institute. And this is an exciting panel. I think, Greg, when we did our little pre-call, you're like, let's just figure out ways to disagree with each other and make it fun. So we'll try our best to keep this livened up. And I will go, and we won't do intros, and we'll sort of, as I call on you, if you can just sort of weave in a little bit about yourself and the company. But I'll start with Sean Gallagher from Northeastern. Sean was nice enough to share a report that he did in October of 2021, reaching out to a lot of employers and sort of really polling and sort of seeing what employers were looking for as they think about business education. And I was particularly intrigued, Sean, by some of the things that you found, that it wasn't necessarily employers just looking to higher ed for business education. They were thinking much more broadly, which gets us to the disruptors on the panel who are sort of thinking oftentimes outside of higher ed. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and a little bit about the report with the group?
Sure. So we focus on the intersection of the world of work and learning, and do a lot of research both regarding corporate L&D and upskilling, and tuition assistance is a hot topic, of course, and also your kind of classic college to career sorts of dynamics. And I think what sometimes gets lost when you have this theme of employability and skills and just, the tremendous pressures that we have in the need for skill development and talent development and talent acquisition is people who are adults and professionals in the workforce, and not just thinking about, okay, college students maybe need, a great first job. So this study was some national interviews. We did some C-suite surveys as well and other projects of 40 HR and L&D leaders, just looking at this expanding universe of options, which I think we have represented here with the providers in the panel, including Ivy League business schools and state universities and continuing ed units, but also non-institutional providers, Coursera, and all sorts of coding boot camps and startups of various sorts. So if you didn't know this already, and I think it's sort of common knowledge at this point, with COVID shifting everything digitally, there was just this leap forward in terms of many corporations and employers saying, look, we want to do these things in a hybrid way and in a more accessible way, in a more innovative way, and I think that's some of the discussion today.
Great. And we'll go to Julia Alexander next, who's our co-founder and chief product officer of ExecOnline. And I know, Sean, you had mentioned in the report that you did, ExecOnline came up a number of times. And Julia, perhaps a little different than some of our other panelists, you embrace your partnerships with higher ed. You're partnered with a number of leading business schools. Talk about the decision to work closely with higher ed and the training that you guys do working through companies.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much. As you said, I'm Julia Alexander, co-founder and head of product at ExecOnline. We're an enterprise learning development platform, and we partner with top business schools to co-develop and deliver online learning programs for now nearly half of the Fortune 500. Since we were founded about 10 years ago, we've worked with over 10,000 and tens of thousands of leaders. So we're keeping our eye to the marketplace, but we're really thrilled to work with top business schools like Stanford, MIT, Columbia Business School. These are all partners of ours for a long time. But at the same time, things are really changing. And what we're discussing with our partners is that, what employers want, what is necessary now is to work beyond the pace of change. So we're co-developing programming with our partners that is more dynamic, more online, more hybrid, and also really just more responsive to the marketplace. And we're really fortunate to have a seat at the table as we're doing that and helping to expand the mission of business schools to also democratize learning beyond the hallways where they are.
Great. Tom Adams next from Pedago and Quantic is your MBA program out in the market. Talk to us a little bit. I know your journey from originally looking at higher ed as a partner, and then eventually deciding that it made more sense to perhaps work with some of the individual faculty members or sort of others. Maybe talk a little bit about how you evolved in that decision to work with higher ed and then perhaps outside it to disrupt higher ed.
That's great. Thank you. So by way of background, I ran Rosetta Stone for about a decade and took that public. And then on leaving there, wanted to continue with education technology and founded a company called Pedago with a primary idea of improving pedagogy in online learning. Our view was that there was a need for much more interactivity. And so we built courseware early on in this new interactive modality that we developed very early. It's smartphone delivered, and sort of sat down with some of the top business schools in the world and sort of told them to try it out. And students loved it. We actually had higher net promoter score than the faculty at some of these top schools. But then they went through different sort of committee meetings and so on, and by way of how some of these decisions happen, I started feeling very uncomfortable about anchoring the business against that channel. In other words, relying on professors to make the right decision for students wasn't somewhere I wanted to go, and also being on their timeline. So we started building our own business school. The way we went about that was really partnering with individual professors at some of the leading business schools in the world, and essentially developing an interactive curriculum within our vision. The result is that we have off-the-charts delight with students on Net Promoter Score 65 in a category that's normally negative 35. We have graduation rates of about 90% in a sort of single-digit percentage graduation category. So it's been wonderful. Now we're beginning to think that we should start exploring partnering with schools because I think it's an opportunity to get the platform out to more people. But as a proprietary school, it's been wonderful to have sort of first-hand exposure to students in terms of what they want and how we can improve the delivery.
Great, thanks, Tom. Next, all the way from Madrid, our friend Hugo. We'll see how I do on your last name. Arevalo?
Yeah, great.
Close? He's like, great, not even great.
My English is worse.
So Hugo is the co-founder and executive chairman of the Power Business School, the Power MBA. Welcome. First trip to San Diego. Enjoying it so far?
Yeah, I enjoy a lot. I mean, San Diego is an incredible city, and actually it's very convenient, and the temperature is insane. I'm gonna live here, I think.
Nice.
I prefer the weather than Europe. Like now it's so cold, so I enjoy a lot.
Awesome. So your approach to instructors in some ways may mirror with some of the other disruptors here, but looking at the Power MBA website, there's a co-founder of Netflix. There are folks from YouTube. I mean, you have tapped into the sort of tech leadership, particularly US tech leadership, to teach your courses. Talk about the approach that you've taken to build your expert network to teach your courses.
That is an incredible question, no? Because imagine, no, a Spanish person who actually doesn't have any contact in the US, how can attract, without money, by the way, these kind of figures, no? What we have done in the last almost 5 years is like, we have the mission to democratize higher business education. Now that is a cliche, but what we have thought at that time is like why we have seen in all of the industries have been disrupted for incredible and pioneers companies such as in retail, Amazon, in content Netflix, in mobility Uber, etc., etc. And we haven't seen any differentiation, any disrupted business school in the last decades. So with what keeping with what feeling in the head, we were thinking about what we're doing the traditional schools and what we have what we want to do in the future. So actually our value proposition is really, really easy. Is flexibility, is affordability, is short microlearning programs, learn from the best of voices, actually having an incredible networking around the world. Actually, we are now in over 90 countries. We are focused in Europe, of course. This is the reason why maybe you don't know us, because actually in the US we are not focused on right now. And we attract these top voices because the mission. It was very clear, it was very easy, something was happening. Actually, they thought, like, for example, the founder of Netflix, the founder of Whole Foods, for example, is on board also. When we attack him, of course, it was really hard to try to get in contact with them. First, the agent, the second agent, the third agent, fourth agent. Then I don't have money, so I need to talk with him. So at the end of the day, first we attract the founder of Waze, and he helped us a lot. We attract him. He actually fell in love about the project. He fell in love the way and the approach. Like, actually, we want to democratize higher business education. He believes like business education, higher business education is not only for the elite, and we give them access, no? We actually are very strong, like we don't really believe, and of course, in all the accreditation. We believe in knowledge. And it's something like, actually, this is the reason, like we now have over 80,000 students. We started as a bootstrapping company. And by the way, we started as a bootstrapping company, but in last summer, we have raised money for the company because we want to actually to expand our knowledge.
Great, thanks, Hugo. Greg, so section 4, I mean, there's so much that's disruptive about the approach. There's some similarities in terms of attracting sort of dynamic faculty. Maybe talk to us a little bit about, I mean, even things like a weekly updates. I mean, there's a lot of very updated content that's on there. There's different links. I mean, in many ways, I mean, each of you brings something very different to the marketplace, but I haven't seen something like the array of offerings like Section 4 and how you're putting it together. So talk about philosophically how you're providing that content.
First of all, listen, guys. It is almost 5 o'clock and you're here. I just want to thank you all on behalf of us, and I want to show my appreciation. My discount code, so we sell an annual membership at $1,000 a year because we think access is mostly about price, meaning make it affordable to anywhere, anyone, anywhere in the world. So every course, every workshop, every live lecture, every coaching session is included in the price of $1,000 a year. Because you came here instead of going to get a cocktail, my discount code is GS750. And if you use that when you check out, it'll cost you $750. And I just want to acknowledge the fact that you are here and not somewhere else. It's been a long day, or you're here because it was the only place to find a seat to sit, which is the second reason you're here. Now, reimagining business schools, let's talk about that for a sec. I think we need to realize that schools aren't schools in terms of business schools. They're career accelerants. And they do it in 3 ways. The first is they brand you as, I have high potential. Secondly, they give you a network. The better school, the better network. And third, they increase your salary when you finish by some amount. Better schools more, lesser schools less, but you get paid more. The fourth thing schools do is they tell recruiters, you will lower your hiring risk by hiring this person. They remove or mitigate risk for the recruiter. That's the purpose of business schools, in our opinion. So I think that what we should be thinking about is how do we build career accelerants that are cheaper, more accessible, and more effective? Not how should we reinvent the business school. In fact, we should be asking business schools to do what we're doing, which is how could you make your product cheaper and faster and more accessible because you're in the career accelerant business. And why do we only want to accelerate the careers of a few thousand people a year? We have more Navy SEALs in the United States than graduates of top 10 business schools every year. Think about that. It's insane. We sell more Ferraris in the United States than we graduate people from the top 20 business schools in the United States. No wonder the ranks of private equity and Wall Street and the C-suite look a certain way. That's who we've graduated from these schools for the last 20 years. You're telling me that's the sum total of all the ambitious people in the world who have the skills and ambition and drive and commitment to get ahead? No. We've got to make product, we've got to create experience for them. We have to create career accelerants for them.
Great.
That's what we're doing.
Awesome. Thanks, Greg. Sean, your research is right at the center of this. Some of these companies are ones that I'm sort of curious as you hear, Greg and others sort of talk about what they're offering to the marketplace, and what traditional MBA programs haven't done and are not doing. Do you give these sort of disruptors and upstarts a chance to really continue to make progress against the traditional MBAs?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, micro-learning came up, speed, right? I think that's a big thing, is the whole faster, cheaper, smaller, right? So rather than, it's of course still happening, but rather than the 25-year-old or even 10-year-old idea of, well, we're going to tap a few people to the access point, tap a few people on the shoulder and say, you know what, we're going to fund you to go for 2 years, leave us, right? We're trying to retain and attract the best talent. You're going to leave us, you're going to go to business school. You have to come back for 2 years after that. Doesn't really scale. It's very expensive. People want promotions, and then they go somewhere else very often. Rather than that, it's much more stackable credentials, micro-learning, micro-credentials. Not to say there's not any less value in the MBA, but we could talk about that too. Mm-hmm. Business education, you're a business professor, right? It's getting more specialized. Mm-hmm. The programs in analytics and in marketing and supply chain are growing, but the traditional MBA, general MBA, not as much. And so, I think business schools, part of the fun of this session is it's been ground zero for this kind of innovation, because those are the parts of universities that are kind of most engaged in the world of work and in serving professionals. I think business education is at least 20, maybe 25, 27% of all the master's degrees awarded in the US. Mm. And that's been the one growing category alongside things like graduate certificates. Well, meanwhile, community college enrollment is in deep decline. The regular 4-year bachelor's degree, very flat, if not modestly declining. So it's a growth market, and it's kind of this mix of course, there are business schools that are very traditional that are struggling. There's some that will always be okay. And then you have these new offerings represented here that are very much in demand. And I think it's exciting that the consumer is willing to consider new options.
Julia, the network. You came, actually, most of our panelists come out of traditional great schools, and Julia, you went to several of them. What are you seeing in the ExecOnline network? How are bonds forming between students? Are folks that sort of go through the programs getting that kind of network that if they would go to a full-time or even a part-time program, what is it about your offering that provides that network?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we're all kind of tackling this question of access in different ways. For us, we're focused at the leader level. We're focused on workforce development and a little bit less at the 2-year MBA. But certainly the tap on the shoulder challenge is one that we're tackling head on at ExecOnline. What we see with our corporate partners and what we're working on is if you are a high potential in an enterprise or in a company trying to get ahead, you're likely to be identified as a high potential just by a single tap on the shoulder. In the vast majority of cases, that's your boss or someone likes you. They call you a high potential, they decide you are, and all of a sudden you're kind of crowned. And then on a pipeline in your organization to greater opportunities. That is hugely problematic, not only for the development of those leaders themselves, but actually also for succession planning, for the need to democratize and widen pipelines. And for us at ExecOnline, we absolutely believe in increasing more equitable outcomes. And unfortunately, a lot of that tap on the shoulder, let's just say, often comes from somebody that's looks like you. Mm-hmm. So for me, when I went to a top business school, there really weren't even that many of us, and it wasn't that long ago. And so when we think about what it's going to take for companies to meet this moment, they're going to need different modalities, different formats, different types of platforms and interactive learning. And so when you're asking about the network begins by widening the access. The network begins by widening the pipeline. And then what we're doing and working with our companies is actually creating networks inside organizations, supporting mentorship and coaching within companies, and then across, we're working and having sort of networks and alumni networks to help with that as well.
Great.
I just want to build on that because one of the interesting things that we found when we first launched was that we were sort of selective out of the gates. And part of it was just that we were trying to imitate the best business schools in the world, and we said they're very selective. And it turns out that it's beautiful to be selective for the people who get in because they essentially feel this camaraderie and they sort of recognize in each other certain attributes. I would say, as a qualifier, that our students are different from the traditional business school students. So most of our students are sort of bioscience, engineering background. Let's say they over-invested in their technical education, arguably, during their 20s. They get into their early 30s and they're trying to move up and get more general management responsibilities, and so we've been able to meet them there. But in general, being selective created that community, and now as we're sort of expanding and creating new schools that will be more, let's say, democratizing and inclusive, we're essentially applying the same philosophy, but we're just changing some of the parameters. And I think that the key to network is really having a sort of mature approach to admissions, where you sort of say, what is the commonality we're after? We all know in traditional ed that it's about a GMAT level or something like that as a commonality, or a level of previous education. And then they look for diversity. And we sort of say we want diversity in certain backgrounds, in industry backgrounds, gender, all sorts of nationalities. But you have to pick what your commonality is, because that commonality is what enables the community. We've sort of, like Julius described, we've invested a lot in developing networking, so we have all of the enablement that you could have with technology, where you can go in and see who else is in the network. We do events around the world for students to sort of meet up. And because of that commonality, they get excited. Because there's a commonality, when someone reaches out individually to one of our students, let's say it's a student-to-student or a student-to-alumni communication, we have extremely high response rates, kind of like what you would have had with a traditional school. So we wholeheartedly agree with this idea that networking and having a core peer group is incredibly important when you're working on reconceiving business school.
Great. Yeah, Hugo, go ahead.
I don't consider to being quite restrictive in the selection, because who is actually saying like you can come in, you can get into the university, and who is not. For example, I give you an example, Jack Ma. Everyone knows Jack Ma, no? He was rejected like 10 times in Harvard. But there is much more examples, like people you really know. Like actually, like actually there is an incredible survey that I love it. I don't remember where it comes from, I think MIT or something like this. Like, people who wants to go to Harvard, really indeed wants to go to Harvard, and people actually, like, the comparison was like people who wants to go to Harvard and versus people who actually went to Harvard. And at the end of the day, after 20 years, they have exactly almost the same salary. So I don't really understand who and why that the sky is the limit. And actually, for me, what I really think is like being restrictive is, I don't understand, is if somebody wants to actually study something, wants to really study something, has to be in. But that is my perception of things.
I agree with Hugo. I think there's two markets now emerging, or have emerged. One is show your certificate, or show your credential, show your brand, right? And those are students that I think welcome the application process in some way, like to feel selected. They've probably been selected before in their lives, the advantages of being selected. And they will pay, because they're going to pay more, to get a certificate that certainly we all might recognize from Kellogg Online or HBS Online in terms of business schools, right? They're going to pay 3, 4, 5, 10x than they probably need to for that, because what they're getting is show your badge. And I think there's a whole new student, and I think Hugo serves these students in Europe, which is, we call them show your work. So we don't vet people on the way in, we vet people on the way out. Our point of view is, you're welcome here, you bring ambition, and you bring a willingness to do the work. Your final project is a project, it's an assignment. You can show it to your employer, you can show it to your peers, you can share it on the network. Other employers could see it. Right? We have this idea that, yeah, if you want the best looking, sort of most established credential on your LinkedIn profile, we're not the choice for you. Right? There are other great choices for that. We're about, like, do the work, and you'll be more valuable in the marketplace, you know?
But just to interject on that, so part of a business school is sort of collaborating with peers, and there's just no doubt that, you know, if you asked anyone who graduated from a top business school, what was the number one value, they'll say the group work, the discussion, and that has to be managed. From our perspective, being customer-centric in our field involves working on the peer group. And if you do open university, the experiment's been run, in my opinion, and it's not successfully developed community. You guys are novel, and so there may be a new sort of way of doing that. But I just sort of lean in on the tried and tested. We've seen communities, and it doesn't have to be just at the GMAT or sort of math level, if you like, the selectivity happens. You see it with the historical black colleges. You see it with women's colleges. When you're selective and you're looking for that commonality, you create peer dynamics.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just not going to buy into you got to be selective to get a common organizing principle to a group of people that have success together. All of our learning is community-based. Every student's in Slack. Every student, you know, we've ripped off business schools, right? Every student's in a section. A section has a TA. The TA is organizing community events and community learning experiences. Absolutely. I'm just saying, and the theme there, from our perspective, is ambition. That's what binds our student body. Not you were selected because you hit some set of criteria and that we had some, you know, formula for what the class should look like. And so I agree on the community. I think these experiences we're building that are I think all of us are online only, but they're not online asynchronous. Mm-hmm. That failed. Like when we all quote these terrible stats about EdTech, you know, completion rates of this and NPS of this, well, we're talking about an asynchronous experience, watching videos and taking quizzes. You know, why do that when you have Netflix? I mean, like, no, I'm serious, right? Like, so we all brag, and I do it too. I brag all the time about our NPS scores. They're great. Our NPS is over 75, and our completion's over 72%, and our learning outcomes in 90 days are at 80%. But look at what I'm comparing to. We had no Peloton in this category. Like, so you know, we're doing good work. We can do a lot better, and so can everybody else. Like in terms of, no one's thought about this as a consumer business. Like the consumer first. That's why NPS and completion and all these metrics of customer satisfaction have been so low in EdTech for over 10 or 20 years.
John, do you want to jump in? Do you have a point? I mean, you've seen.
Well, I had a quick thing I was going to throw in, and so this is not specific to business education, but if you look across all disciplines, and a big chunk of it is business at the historic, you know, traditional degree market, and I'm going to get the exact institutions wrong, doing it off the top of my head, the largest scale awarders of master's degrees in the United States for many years now include institutions like Harvard, Penn, Columbia, USC, NYU. We think of them as selective institutions, but for decades they've been doing part-time and executive MBA and in some cases online degrees. So especially in these circles, we tend to think about, you know, for Ivy League and highly selective, but there's actually this precedent in terms of your brand and then having these more access-oriented businesses within these elite schools. And I think that's also kind of a unique case in business education. You know, there's a lot of demand. There's a lot of different sort of segments of the market for different types of customer.
Right. Let's talk about demand. I mean, Hugo, when we were talking before, and one of the themes in today's panel was around COVID, you talked about the way that you're finding your customers and how it changed a little bit over COVID. Do you want to chat about direct-to-consumer versus partnering with businesses to find your students?
Yeah, how COVID has changed the landscape of education now. There is no doubt that COVID has changed dramatically the landscape in terms of everyone's now, it's a fact like they can learn a lot online teaching. That is a reality. Before COVID, there was a debate like, I don't know, in traditional school, they were saying like, no, I don't think like you can learn actually in online. And now it's a reality and a fact. I'm not saying like there is the only way to learn, and I'm not saying actually like it's important actually having something in person, because for example, in our case, as actually Greg mentioned, we do events, we do networking events that they are really, really important. Not only chatting, not only actually having a social network into the platform, I think is really, really important. And COVID, that is a reality, accelerates so much the online education. What I'm seeing that, by the way, is after COVID, what is happening after COVID? So the new normal, the new reality, I think like people now wants to enjoy a lot. So they are quitting a little bit like learning, but the good things and good news about this landscape is like is gonna be here now for the rest of the years, and we have to actually, now is the time to have the next generation of business school. And I want to say something just very quickly. What is happening about the new next generation of business school is because we here in the US, we have 1.7 trillion in debt. And we only hear about people that they repay back the debt, but it's the second largest debt after mortgages. And that problem is an incredible problem because the prestigious universities, of course, they are so valuable, and actually you usually get a good work, and actually you can repay back the loans. But the problem is about those universities that they are in the middle of nowhere, and they pay the same amount that these prestigious and well-known brand universities, and then they actually don't have the expectation that they thought the students, and they don't reach a real incredible jobs. I'm attacking of those sectors that I think is gonna suffer a lot in the next years. And actually, we are open, in our case, Section 4 also, we're open the market a lot. We're broaden the market, and we're attacking the actually non-customer persona, not the before current customer persona.
Yeah, only 90% of our students have never taken any online business class. Like it's clear what we're doing here is opening up a market that has not been able to be served before. Mostly, I believe, because the product has not been good enough and the price has been too expensive. The brands are good that are in the game, in terms of business school brands. They're top schools. But, anywhere from $3,000 to $30,000 for an online certificate. I mean, you can do the math. Like, that's a lot of gross margin for a digitally delivered learning experience. I mean, they could ship you the bike.
Yeah, it's a really, really good set of questions. I think for us, when we're taking our position in the market, we're working on the one hand with our universities and helping them and partnering with them to hear what the market is saying. These are the bastion of really some of the most learned, some of the best research, and we want to really channel that to the needs of employees and to the needs of corporations. And so we're going to have to do that by changing the business model of how they work, but also diversifying and opening up the way and who's actually teaching at business schools. So in our portfolio with ExecOnline courses, we have 40% women and more than 30% people of color teaching in our courses, which significantly overrepresents the tenured faculty and adjuncts, the whole faculty of any top business school, significantly. So we are making change in this way by pulling forward faculty who may be underestimated and overlooked in their own organization, their own institution, and elevating that. And then matching that together by increasing pipelines at the corporate level and working with our clients to have better access. So we see a lot of value in that combination.
Julia, that is super cool.
Thanks. You're cool too.
I think that the diversity of your faculty is amazing, and that you've made that effort and commitment to do that. We know how hard it is to find and collect, to bring a faculty together is hard.
Thanks, likewise.
Tom, do you want to talk about, I mean, as you try to go to market and find these students out there, how are you doing it, and what is your marketing approach? I mean, there's a nice chart on your website that sort of shows the value that Quantric offers as opposed to the more traditional MBA program. So how are you going in marketing?
So the primary segment we focused on has actually been more executive MBA. So we've thought about that as the folks who weren't really going to the sort of school that converts you from an industry person into a consultant, which is how I'd characterize some of the traditional business schools. And so we thought a lot about the needs of the 30-something, 40-something, 50-something making their career transition. A lot of them want this sort of generalist education. They don't have certain fundamentals of business because they've been over-indexing in engineering. And so the way we zeroed in on those segments was we identified, let's say, profiles that are interesting, either from an industry standpoint or from a sort of just the profile of the company. And so we seek folks out that way. And then we give them a trial. Essentially, during the application process, you'll complete something like 40, 50 classes in our program, and we do that as a sort of fundamentals of business, kind of like what you would do in the summer before you actually went on campus at the business school. And we find that cements their confidence. And so a lot of our funnel involves essentially giving people a sampling moment and a significant one. And because we're so damn good at engineering learning, so we make it very interactive. Every 8 seconds the student is interacting. It kind of feels way more interactive than traditional e-learning. And they love it. And so that's what works, and we have high enrollment rates and so on as a result.
Great. Sean, we have a couple of minutes left. Maybe I'll give you the last word. As you see these disruptors, and you also, obviously, as do I, sit inside higher ed, what do you see in the future? I mean, are you optimistic that the 4 folks on our panel who represent a whole group of other disruptors that are out there are going to continue to grow the pot and get more folks into the kind of broad umbrella of business education?
Yeah, I mean, different models and different customers that they're targeting, but absolutely more of this. And I think we'll see, another related trend is we see more employers themselves becoming learning providers and credentialers, right, with their brand names and their knowledge and their desire to grow their ecosystem or supply chain. The era, if you were at, this event didn't exist, but same sort of community, 1999, 2000, the early .com sort of initial online education companies. There was this idea we would have, star faculty, and now we've arrived at that kind of moment with these firms and others where it's like you can find some of the best professors or teachers or learning models in the world, and you can deliver that at scale, and we have the bandwidth and we have the tools. And so then you add COVID and that digital leap forward. I think this world was already arriving, and I don't know when each of the organizations was founded, but about 5 or 6 years ago. And then now it's just accelerated. So from my perspective, at least, for what it's worth, much more of this, yeah.
This is great. I will make one comment. I put my Coursera class up in 2014 for Case, and I was an adjunct at the time. I just come back from Vietnam, and one of my colleagues, who's sort of a more traditional tenure track, was like, online is only for famous people like me. And that would be him, not me. And I was like, oh, okay. But I did it anyway. So it's great to hear what you guys are all doing. I mean, this is a really inspiring panel. Thank you to the audience for sticking with us late here in San Diego, and for those that are watching online, and wishing everybody a great rest of the conference and success to our entrepreneurs that are up here.
Thanks
you.
so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.